Eyda, and her routine YouTube videos, Crawling Mondays, which you can follow on YouTube as well. Aleyda is renowned as being one of the experts in the SEO industry on international SEO. And today, she's going to take that and bridge it into how to build a successful international SEO e-commerce program, which doesn't only rank, but sells. Let's kick things off.
Hello there. Thank you for joining me today. In this session, you will learn how to take your online store abroad in a cost-effective way. Selling abroad can be a great way to diversify your e-commerce business and scale your shop revenue. There's an important e-commerce organic search traffic potential out there, and you can use tools like SimilarWeb or SEMrush to identify what is the volume of traffic that is attracted already by the top players in those international markets where you would like to go or that you are accessing to go. There are also tools like Google Market Finder that will suggest potential opportunities abroad based on your own specific characteristic and industries. I have to say though, the best of course is to do a proper validation and analysis and research with your own data, and then of course your own capacity, identifying what is the potential traffic volume from these international countries, making sure that you have the internal capacity to natively support this type of audiences, making sure that there's also operational type of capability to send your products, to handle customs, etc., like multi-currency type of support too. So there are a lot of factors here that are beyond SEO. What it is critical in general is that you verify and really validate that the potential traffic and conversions that you will be able to take from this country and attract from these countries will end up generating a positive ROI based on the difficulties, costs, challenges, investment that you will need to do also in order to tackle this type of challenges, and additional steps that you will need to take than the current ones that you already do for your online store, right? And all of this is important that you do while giving the best possible localized search experience in case you target international markets of languages that you don't speak, that you have a proper native validation there. And then if all of this assessment is positive, then you should definitely go abroad in order to attract and diversify and grow much more your online store. But then if it is not possible, you may want to buy and secure your CCTL links in these markets, create custom alerts so you are notified whenever you reach a certain point where you can already identify that it might be worthy to target this new markets, and or start selling in existing marketplaces to see and test the waters and see how the audience behaves in this market. What are the preferences, what are the conditions, what are the usual issues that you find there, in order to be much more sure that is a good market to go for and establish an actual presence for. And all of this needs to be taken into consideration and more along, I will say, 3 core typical issues that will arise when you go international, right? These are typical questions that are asked and usually are challenges, because some of the top e-commerce platforms don't necessarily support this by default, and we are going to see how to tackle them, how to configure them. First, the selection of an international web structure. Second, how to scale localization for all of your products and categories in a cost-effective way. And third, how to implement a shop annotations without triggering error in order to make sure to show the right page to the right audience every time in every country. But you don't want to handle lots of errors or investing a lot of time and resources in some implementations that won't pay off at the end of the day, right? So let's see how to do this in 3 of the most popular e-commerce platforms: WooCommerce, Magento, and Shopify. For the first challenge, what the best international web structure to use in a new markets? I mean, if you just want to test the water at the beginning with your current store, what you can do is to enable, of course, multi-currency, and then also you have conditions to sell abroad, to international shipping. However, this won't allow you to really grow internationally, making the most out of each country's specific search behavior, preferences, potential, because people in other countries will tend to search with their own languages, also have a different type of preferences. Even if they search with your own language, they will have different seasonality, different terms to search with, etc., etc. So this is good to test the water and validate a little bit what's the market, but not necessarily to grow abroad. If you want to go abroad, you will tend to need a differentiated web structure that can be whether with ccTLDs to geolocate by default to these new countries, or can be via subdirectories or subdomains within GTLDs that you can register through the Google Search Console to geolocate to each one of these two markets, right? So which is the one that you should choose? It depends a little bit of your own capacity to grow in these markets, right? Maybe you go and check which are the two players already ranking in these markets, and you see that there are GTLDs there, that not all of this are country domains. But then on the other hand, that there's a non-trivial authority from this domain, that these are domains that have been established already for many years, and that have millions of incoming links, of backlinks pointing to them. So it will be very unlikely that you will be able to compete in these markets right away. So to facilitate and accelerate the process, you may want to use GTLDs to reuse your current GTLD, your current .com, and enable subdirectories so you can consolidate all of your authority in a single property and advance faster. For example, on the other hand, you may see that there are only ccTLDs ranking there, and these ccTLDs, they don't necessarily have millions of links, but their link popularity is much more feasible to compete with, so you may want to decide ccTLD. So again, pros and cons, different alternatives that I hope this flowchart helps you to select the best possible type of configuration in your particular set, your particular situation and a scenario, right? And we can see that there's actually a mix of this across major players like GD Sport target countries via ccTLDs, which are by default geolocated to each market. ASOS target countries with subdirectories under a GTLD. What it is important is that, again, in each case, you need to go to the Search Console and register each subdomain or subdirectory to its particular country, and don't try to target regions as continents, for example. These are not supported by Google. You can specify to Google that you are targeting specific languages as well as country, but not regions. So those .eu, .asia type of extensions, they won't geolocate you to those regions by default, right? And if you are made or you are pushed or we really need to use regional type of targeting because of legal reasons, business reasons, etc., the best way is to do it so that if you will use GTLDs and then enable subdirectories for each one of the countries, as Patagonia is doing here. Otherwise, you will end up having the situation that Allbirds is having here. They have a .eu version in English, right? But then they also have a .uk in English. And realistically, in Europe, the country that really searches in English is the UK. So which is the country that the .eu should be tied to, or which are the set of countries? Most of these countries, they won't search in English. They will search in German, French, Spanish, any other language, right? So this European version is not necessarily attracting as much as it could if they were targeting a specific country. So it's something that you will need to verify and validate well before doing. How to implement this with major e-commerce platforms here. We can see that Shopify supports multi-language targeting, relying on translation apps though, not natively. And they also have compatible themes that you can reuse for this type of international targeting for multilingual. However, I have to say the reliance is major on this third-party type of extensions. Like, for example, you can find them through the Shopify App Store. It's not something that they provide by default natively, right? So you can find their apps like Translation Lab and Wiglo that are very well known. They will allow you to register sometimes or install them for free. They are freemium in many cases, like in the case of this particular one, the Translation Lab, that will enable subdirectories for each one of the new languages like this. But then if you want to target countries, Shopify doesn't really has support for multi-country configuration. You will need to create independent stores for each one of them and then use subdomains or independent domains, ccTLDs for them. You cannot use subdirectories, unfortunately, for different countries. So that is a restriction that they do have. So for example, Quadlocase, they use different ccTLDs for international targeting. Then on the other hand, WooCommerce, they have all of the WordPress multilingual plugins to support. And many of these plugins actually offers particularly specific additional plugins for WooCommerce in order to really facilitate the whole translation process too. And realistically, they offer all of the flexibility. So for example, again, in this particular case, I was doing this with WPML, and they allow me to select from subdirectories, subdomains, or domains for international versions for multi-country configuration. They will also support both country and languages versions too, in a very straightforward way. Then also Magento is something similar, and they actually provide this functionality natively without relying in external plugins even, because you can set different versions across stores or store views if you want. And as you can see, you can go to the store's configurations and enable the full countries and the different countries version tied to the URL base that you want to choose to. So this is one of those configurations that Magento really supplies the best option for natively, directly within their own platform, right? And after you select and configure your international web structure, the next question is how do I translate, or even better, to how do you localize each one of them for your different countries that you are targeting, right? Going native is critical. You can make or break global sales like this, because people search in their own language, and they want to buy and want to see and verify and validate that these products are really targeted towards them, right? So the localization of your content is key to connect with your international audience preferences and behavior, even in the same language, I have to say, right? For example, here, Allbirds, they are targeting, again, the UK, but their metadata and their content is exactly the same as in the US. And they have runners and sneakers in the content, as you can see here. But in the UK, as we can see here in the data, they don't search with runners or sneakers. They search with trainers, women trainers, right? So unfortunately, Allbirds, it's probably not ranking as well as they could, or even if they are, the audience from the UK won't be incentivized as much to click on this particular page, because there will be others that are better connecting with their own specific search preferences. So the goal here is to localize different user-facing areas of your shop. The URLs are usually also left out. The navigation, the metadata, descriptions, the slogans, notifications, everything. For example, Adidas here, they do a great job with their version in the UK. They have men's trousers, and in Canada, they have men's pants. So very straightforward, right? But the challenge here, how do you do it with dozens of countries, hundreds of categories, thousands of products? It's about having an iterative and incremental approach from translation to localization up to transcreation, when you create something that is specifically connected and focused on that particular audience, right? For a particular marketing campaign there. So start little by little. You can start with automated translation via plugin, app integration with the new generation of translation translator apps like the DeepL one that is really, really, really good, relied on AI. And then before releasing, you may want to double check with a native translator to check that all the terms are correct, that there are no errors that could be easily fixed. After you launch, you may want also to check again with the keyword research, using the keyword research and competition research that you have done to replace those terms that you see that people actually use to search for your products or services. And then, of course, creating particularly specific pieces for each one of the markets based on the identified search behavior there. And doing this at scale by establishing patterns to generate the main content elements for each one of your pages type. You don't need this to do this first page by page. And how to implement this process with the most popular e-commerce platforms. Well, I have to say again, and this is very important to highlight, I wouldn't be recommending to do automated translation, or to use, in any case, automated translation, even at the start, if there wasn't good enough solution as they are right now with translators like DeepL, that they use neural networks, they use AI-based translation that is by far much better than the one that you will see, for example, in Google Translate. And these tools are already also integrated with CAT tools that are the ones that are used by translators to accelerate and facilitate their work. So this is a win-win. It's not one or the other, but tie them both together, right? These platforms also, the Shopify, WooCommerce, etc., they will also offer their own translation apps in their own app store. So for example, here, Shopify offered a few of them. Again, this particular translation lab here, they will offer you free translation up to 1 point. After that, you will need to pay. It's a freemium, but you can already validate and verify with a native speaker to if the translation is good enough for that country to launch, or if not, to do a validation, manual validation, but a native translation before doing it so, and optimizing it afterwards, starting with the most important pages. Again, something similar with Magento, right? They offer all of these solutions, although many of them are paid. There are not that many that are freemium, I have to say. And then, of course, with WordPress, WooCommerce, there's much more flexibility here. The translation plugins are the same, and then the international ones, WPML, Polyland, they will offer you options to manually translate the most important aspect of your international website. They will also integrate with third-party translation solutions, as you can see here, with automated or on-demand services that will connect directly with the different type of fields or areas that you want to translate directly within the CMS. And then the most powerful solutions like DeepL, they will also offer APIs and plugins for WordPress, for example, that you can use in this particular case to translate in bulk in a very straightforward way. And our last challenge here, how to implement this offline to rank with the right pages without triggering errors, especially if you have thousands or even millions of URLs, right? So the thing is, the goal of hreflang annotations is to specify to Google which is the relevant page version that should rank and should be shown in each country or language, in case you have many variations of them. So for example, here we are searching from the US for Nike Pico Blue. So it should be the US version for this page, the one that should be ranked. But however, we can see here how we can see instead the one of the UK, or this LU, Luxembourg version. What is this? Or Canada here, right? This shouldn't be the case. So the way that we should move forward with this is that each one of our indexable URLs that exist across different languages and countries, they should be tagged with the relevant values, specifying which is the language and the country that they target and what are the variations of them. And you can implement this via the head of the HTML, which is good for a small number of URLs, or if you have flexibility in your HTML, XML sitemap in case you don't have flexibility, if you have millions of them, or the HTTP header for resources, non-HTML documents, right? The thing is, in many occasions, that look to be a very straightforward type of implementation triggers lots of errors. And even John Muir has said in the past, is this one of the trickiest type of configurations, implementations in SEO. And this is because mainly we don't need to only specify the page that is being shown to the user, its own language or country, but you should also specify which are the other variations at the same time, every single time. So imagine having to include, if you have 3 versions, 3 tags every single time for each pages, right? And then again, make sure that you canonicalize well, self-canonicalizing every time. A lot of people think that you need to canonicalize only to a specific version, to the original version, potentially the one that is the initial one that they consider to be the original. No. Each page in this case should self-canonicalize because each one of them is their own original version for that particular new market, right? So again, there are a few things that are not necessarily correctly facilitate the implementation in general. So for example, in the particular case of e-commerce site, the high number of URLs per countries, highly dynamic inventory, lack of parity between the different pages and markets, this won't facilitate things. So it's critical to prioritize if you really need to implement hreflang, and if so, in which pages, right? And I will say, this flowchart can guide you through this. I have to say though, that is critical that you do it only if you check that you have this type of issues, at least at the start, when you don't have that many implementation resources, technical resources, right? Go and check if you are ranking with the wrong pages in the wrong markets, right? If you are getting traffic to your UK version from the US or from Canada or from France, for example, and like this, and those should be the pages that if you assess that you have different versions for this page that should be targeted to these other markets instead, you should go for. So for example, in this case, we are seeing the UK version for Nike attracting traffic from the US. We should go to these particular pages from the UK version and see if they have a US version. If they have a US version, so these are the perfect pages to tag with hreflang annotations, to specify to Google which should be the pages that should be ranking instead of this in the US. But if these pages don't have a US alternate versions, or if really you don't want to offer these pages for the US with a US version in particular, then it's okay that the UKs are the ones attracting traffic, or really that you should really prioritize in this case only those pages that you have across many markets, different markets, and the ones that are ranking erroneously in the world market. These are the ones that you should move forward to prioritize in extra plan annotations to minimize issues. And then how to do this with the most popular e-commerce platforms. So we have here that, again, WordPress, WooCommerce, they will facilitate this with multilingual plugins. You just need to specify the hreflang value here, if it is only language or language and country, using Google specifications of the language codes and country codes that they support via ISO's type of standards, that they will specify this in their own official documentation, of course. And then the tags will be automatically included in case there are many versions for that particular page across the different versions that exist. So it's automatic and works pretty well. Then, of course, we have Magento. Magento supports hreflang annotations via extensions like the Magic Word Magento 2 SEO extension that will allow you to specify which type of pages should include hreflang annotations. If it is home pages, main category pages, or also product pages. I will say this type of issues tend to happen across the pages that will rank for non-trivial type of traffic, rankings, search potential, right, that exists across all of the different versions. So potentially you may want to prioritize these implementations across your categories and subcategories instead of product URLs that will be changing all the time, and spans are specific for each country. And then Shopify to allow this this implementation through the theme.liquid layout page. You need to go to the layout page like this and edit the template by adding these tags like this that will be replaced with the canonical URLs in each case, like that, adding also the specific language and country values as I am showing on screen. So it is a native support, but you need to go and edit a little bit the theme templates, the theme.liquid one, as I am showing on screen. Again, if you think that this is too complex to do and it's too critical also for you, I will say you should rely probably in an enterprise level tool, a generator like the hreflang builder here that has a cost, but will allow you to generate hreflang annotations from XML sitemaps with a lot of flexibility that you can control in a very straightforward way. And then, of course, you should crawl the implementation before and after releasing to identify hreflang validity issues with tools, SEO crawlers like Bright or Swipe. They have a really good integration and validation, and will directly tell you if there are any issues regarding wrong language and country codes, redirected pages, non-indexable pages, broken pages that are being tagged, and it will trigger errors in the Google Search Console. So set alerts also to be warned whenever hreflang configurations are changed. You really to be alerted when this happens, especially if your website is changing all the time, as e-commerce website with tools like Content King or Little Warden too. So by following this step, I hope that you'll avoid the most common type of international SEO challenges. I have a little summary here showing how each one of the platforms tend to support each one of this type of configurations that you will need to do, and I have covered before. And hopefully by doing this, you will be able to scale and diversify your conversions across different countries and languages, as I am showing on screen, and you won't rely only in one market, while making this a cost-effective type of process at the end of the day that will generate a positive ROI. Thank you very much. If you have any question, I'll be more than happy to answer them now.
Okay, thank you so much, Hamlet and Aleyda. Really appreciated both of your presentations. I love the quiz, by the way, Hamlet, and the international examples as well. Aleyda, great stuff, great stuff. So,
can you believe that they were suggesting Neil Patel?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Who was it again? Who was the
it was
greatest
SEO? It was SEO Moz.
SEO Moz. Okay. Now, did you ask who the greatest international SEO in the world is, by the way?
That would be Aleyda, right?
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
So we're going to kick things off right now in Q&A. One question that came up a bit, and I think really addresses both of your presentations, is that, okay, working a lot in e-commerce SEO, right? So especially in Shopify and some other platforms, one thing that I've found a great way to differentiate from your competitors is to add natural language Q&A to product pages, and then even sometimes collections or category pages sync that up with FAQ, schema, et cetera, right? Really works well for those natural questions that you went over today, Hamlet, with a lot of the tools that you shared. But one question that we had, and applying that same mindset to international e-commerce building, is can a lot of the tools that you went over today, Hamlet, in your presentation, be used in various different languages, East Asian languages, Cyrillic, et cetera, for spanning out a solid international strategy?
Yeah, the answer is yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. And any tips in applying natural language, Q&A, and scaling that out internationally, Aleyda?
Yeah, I will say that what I tend to do with clients, right, that they have started, usually it tends to be an English-speaking language in the US, for example, they will have a wealth of Q&A. So what I will do is to start with that initial audience research, keyword research, competition research, identify which are the top queries that are the hottest ones, the most important ones in those international markets, and then try to correlate and identify which are the ones that are already covered in English in the existing market that they are targeting. So we will tend to prioritize that, these ones that are also that they already have for the current markets in English, to localize them first. So we will localize a number of them at the beginning. So when they start with the new website, it's not empty. And then the users, especially if it is a UGC, right? The users in Spanish, in French, in German, they see the first 5 Q&A, even if it is not much, right? They already see questions and answers in their own languages. So they are incentivized more to participate at the start instead of starting from scratch completely. And I have to say, this translation is the perfect scenario to use DeepL at scale, right? So you don't need to hire a native translation services that tend to be also not necessarily cheap to do all of this from scratch, but you can translate with DeepL, for example, that use neural network, AI type of translation, and really, really good to translate it first. And then the native translator can only revise to make sure that it really makes sense and validate, so they can advance faster in the process too.
Yeah. And Lauren, I would like to add that, because you're using that's an excellent idea of translation students starting from scratch, right? But then, how do you scale it from there so that you're also answering, a specific questions that are regional in importance or language specific, or, because across the world, people are going to have completely different needs, right? An advantage of using, AI is that it's scalable, right? So and the reason why this works in different languages is because the models are, in theory, language agnostic, because at the end of the day, they're numbers. They're using math. They're completing all these words are turning to numbers. All the language, everything in the language is turning to numbers, and then at an abstract level, they perform very similarly. But in practice, there are nuances because of and they need to be fine-tuned on the different languages. But the capability to do it in different languages is available. But here, it's the same idea. You have you have a German website, you have German questions from your support, because that's the idea that I presented framed in my presentation. You already have this answer. You already have these questions and answers from the interactions of the customers, support emails, chats, and then you're using AI to mine that information, surface those questions that are already useful and powerful, and then exposing them out of your proprietary interactions in a public format on the website, and then adding the schema annotation in the other elements. But yeah, the translation will be phase 1 right now. We have everywhere, and as Aleyda mentioned, provides incentive for everybody to get involved and ask the novel questions. But then you can also enrich it with proprietary questions that you have for those specific languages and regions.
Very cool. And then also, speaking of, I guess, implementing international targeting across the site, do you have any recommendations on the best way to implement hreflang tags and pagination, right? especially like from a blogging perspective or a category collection perspective, where it's page 2, page 3, page 4, et cetera, where especially maybe where the listings on those pages in the English version of the site may be different than the listings from the Spanish version of the site?
That is a great question. And the problem is, I think that people tend to focus too much in this type of pages that are highly dynamic, and where it, in most cases, 99% of the scenarios, it doesn't really pay off or makes much sense to try to implement extra flag annotations, because first, they are not replicated across different markets, which are the type of pages that really make sense to tag with extra flag annotations, to really specify to Google which are the right versions that should be ranked and shown in each market, right? If it only exists for one market, or it doesn't make sense to tag with anything else, right? And you may have very specific pages also, and offering based on the specific audience preferences of each country, right? And then for paginations, this is the thing. Paginations are not the pages that end up ranking in 99% of the cases, unless there's something wrong with the website. So let's fix that first, I will say. So realistically, there's no incentive, or I wouldn't really implement extra flag annotations in paginations, because what you really want to tag are the main category pages, facets, etc. Those pages that are really the ones ranking and attracting traffic from the SERPs, realistically, not the paginations. I wouldn't waste my effort there, for sure.
Okay, so one, your pagination pages should not be, having them really show up a lot in the SERPs is a problem at the end of the day too. So really tackle what's going on there. And then 2, make sure that your core pages, right? That's the content that's going to be duplicated, or not duplicated, but scaled across various different countries, does have that markup. Now, we have a lot of questions that came in about the X default, which seems to be a little bit of a confusion point in the world of international SEO. So Alex writes, when and how do you recommend using an X default for the hreflang tag? Is it only on one page for every site? Should it be one X default for different regions, et cetera, et cetera? So what are your tips there?
Well, I will say that X default really makes sense when you want to have this global version that many websites have, that they want to use as the specific page that they really want to push or show whenever you are not specifically targeting those audiences, right? So for example, if you don't have a New Zealand version, and in case you don't want to use I don't know, the US one, that is the one that will tend to outrank anything else, because it's the first one, the one that has higher authority, etc. And you want to show by default the UK one to all of these other English-speaking markets that you are ranking for without having a specific version. So for example, maybe you have non-trivial traffic from Australia or New Zealand, and you still are not ready to go there. So you want to push the UK one. So you go and specify an X default to the UK one. Realistically though, if we think about it, you will achieve the same if instead of implementing the X default tag for these pages, you implement the EN one in general, right? Specifying this is my preferred version for all English-speaking markets. For me, it will make much more sense. I prefer to go more granular and more specific, because maybe you have a preferred one for English-speaking markets. Maybe you have a preferred one for Spanish-speaking markets, right? Maybe you have one for Mexico, one from Spain, one from Colombia. So in those cases, the default one where you want to show the users to when they are searching from a market that you are not specifically targeting, but is Spanish speaker, maybe it's not the UK version necessarily, right? But maybe it's the Mexico version or the Spain version, right? So I will tend to not necessarily use as much X default because of that. I prefer to, in any case, have a sort of fallback with languages on one hand, and then on the other hand, when it really, really makes sense to use X default is when you have like a global overall entry homepage, like Sarah does, for example. If you go to sarah.com in the root, you won't find like the proper website there, a homepage. They just have a selector that you can choose from. So they are pushing this page to rank whenever anybody searches for the brand. So this page will be the one that catches or is shown by default whenever someone searches Sarah from Nicaragua. And of course, they don't have a Nicaraguan version, so people will tend to go there and select the best preferred version in that case, giving the choice to user. So X default, when you have like a homepage generic where you want to refer the user to select a version from, and then I will tend to use languages along countries to specify a generic version for when you have like many English-speaking, Spanish-speaking, French-speaking versions, but there's only one that you want to refer the users for all those same language audiences that you are not specifically targeting yet with a specific version.
Excellent. Thank you. That's fantastic. I think we're going to take the transcription of your answers, Aleyda, and make individual blog posts on SEJ. So I think we have a couple of blog posts you there. Amazing. So I was running an SEO audit the other day, and one of the issues I got back was that the site I was looking at had 53,000 different images without an alt attributes. And this is just a domestic site. This is not like spanning across multiple borders or languages. Hamlet, what should I do? What can I do? How can I automate that?
We have a tutorial in SEJ, right? So you know that one, right? So we have a tutorial in SEJ that shows you how to use AI to transcribe, to write a description of images where we're using computer vision. And it sounds like it complicated a lot of work. You know, I said it in the talk, it was only 3 lines of code, and people were making fun of me on Twitter. Oh, every line has like 5,000 characters. No, it's not as complicated as that. So there is, if you look for Pythia, I think it's a model from Facebook called Pythia, that I have a step-by-step tutorial on how to take thousands of images with no alt text, and using computer vision from a framework from Facebook that will actually write the description of the images based on visually seeing what they have. It's not because of the images have text, it's actually writing that. And a lot of people that got excited and started on Python, that was the article that inspired them. I'm thinking about Ruth Everett from Dickro. She saw it and she says, wow, this is something I can actually do myself and try it out. And it's really cool. So I will invite you to try that.
Awesome. I am on it, and I'm going to figure out what those 53,000 images are. So thanks to both of you so much. Thank you, Hamlet. Thank you, Aleyda. It's been a pleasure. Really awesome. That's it for the Q&A. Of course, we're going to send some more questions over as we get them coming in throughout the course of the day. We're going to be taking a 20-minute break for networking, and then all the sponsored demos in the expo hall. So if you go to the left side of Hopin, you can select networking, or you